All right, good morning, everybody. I'm glad it was muted because I may have accidentally said a cuss word as I tripped back there. So I did not expect, I'm sorry, Lee, I'm sorry. I didn't expect that there was a little step there and I stumbled in. So I apologize if that is recorded anywhere. This is just how real of a person I am. I'm sorry. I make big mistakes on some of the biggest days of my life. Whoa, wow. Okay, all right. Let's get back to business. You guys know the routine. If you have a Facebook enabled device, please get on. Don't share the expletive, but share what's going on here. We're doing some awesome things, and it's amazing the stories I hear later about how we share the sermons and you know how it's impacted them just in wherever they're at in life if they can't be here today. So feel free to share that. And I wanted to just jump right into this scripture this morning because we've been taking a long time with verse 3, with the irritability and irrational, you know, all that fun stuff. And then we get to this part where it says that love keeps no record of wrongs, or love does not keep a record of wrongs. These 7 or 8 words that I think a lot of us struggle with, I really want to get into it this morning and share a few illustrations, a few stories of my own life, and just really talk about how this series, when I first heard the name, I'm like, whoa, Lee, we're getting a little racy. How to be a better lover. This sounds like one of those Rick Warren books, but I'm like, no, I don't have anything against Rick Warren. I'm sorry, personally. But these 7 words that are so hard that I think that are, it's so easy to move forward and say, okay, I've forgiven you, but I haven't forgotten, right? That whole 9. I started thinking about how holding a record of wrongs was very, very damaging in my upbringing. I remember that when I first got married, I had to be very transparent with Kim and say, this is how we communicate in my family. And it's a huge lack of communication, so it's almost like an oxymoron. I remember growing up, and you would know that there was something wrong, that you had a problem with somebody because they would be quiet. They would ignore you. They would act like you didn't even exist until you finally were like, man, that's childish. I ain't even going to deal with that. And then it starts to bother you after a while when you're living in community with somebody, when you're sharing a house or a space with somebody, and they walk past you like you don't exist. I mean, after a while, you finally jam them up and say, hey, what's the problem? And then it's still a bit of a blow up, maybe not as bad as it would have been in the beginning if we had dealt with it. But I remember that when we first got married, like whenever Kim was quiet, I was like, hey, what's wrong? Like we said we were going to talk to her. She's like, I'm fine. I'm just being quiet. And so I had to go into like my dysfunctions and be like, this is how messed up I am, is that when you're enjoying solitude and silence, I think you're mad at me. So that's just a little background of how I grew up. But again, love does not keep a record of wrongs. And when I thought about this, I really started thinking about my opening, and I was teasing Lee earlier, but I started thinking about my opening. Every time I've got up here to speak, something has gone wrong with the live stream. Are we good? Okay, cool. But I was thinking, oh no, never mind. I'm gonna move on from that. I got it out of my system by tripping in there, so we're good. So let's talk about being a better lover, and hopefully no cuss words will slip out this morning. In a world that has taken about every word that we have and made it whatever they want it to mean, I think love stands out the most. Where do we look for a constant? Where do we get this true definition from? Where's the final say on what love should mean and how it should move us towards engaging others? And Scripture lays it out. It's very black and white. And I'm going to speak some Spanglish to you real quick. No, I'm going to, for those of you that are language majors, I'm really going to struggle with this right now. So it's the is's and the ain'ts. The is's and the ain'ts of love, right? It's the do's and don'ts of love. It's the yeses and nos. Scripture makes it so easy, even a caveman can do it, right? That's my shameless Geico plug, sorry. I love Geico, man. They came through in a pinch on us. But is it really that easy? I mean, it's in black and white. It tells us exactly what we're supposed to do, but we continually struggle with it. That's why this is a point in Scripture that God continually comes back to. Scripture lays it out, black and white. Why do we have to address this all the time? Why wouldn't there be more love in our world? Why couldn't there be less hate? Why is there less misunderstandings, less records? We struggle with love, we struggle with being loved, and we struggle with loving others because most of the love that we live out is self-serving, if we're absolutely honest, if we take a look at it. We love out of commitment. Oh, that's a great thing, but sometimes it's bad. We love out of contentment. Things are okay right now, I can deal with this. And we also love out of convenience. And this is not what God has set up for us. This is not the holy love that he's laid before us. This is not the love that he's extended to us that sees past every wrong that we've ever done. For the sake of this sermon, I want to define love for a second. And it's arguable. We can go back and forth on that. But I want you to think about it. If we're talking about love today, and a love that does not keep a record of wrongs, I want you to consider the love that we're talking about today so that we're all on the same page. To give what is absolutely needed when it's utterly undeserved. So think about that. If we're talking about love today, it's not that like, I love you as my wife, I love you as my pastor, I love you as my friends, I love you as my community. But let's talk about a biblical love that gives absolutely what is needed when it's utterly deserved the least. The hardest love that is being given out there. This is a godly love, a love that keeps no record of wrongs. This love does what is needed and does not hold back because of past hurts. Think about that. When we hold back our love because of past hurts, we're not living in forgiveness. This love breaks down barriers. This is love. And one of the most frequent conversations that I have with people as I'm out hanging out in the community is they want to battle against this idea of God's love. And I love it because, we can go round and round on it because they've really, truly never experienced it, even though they have. And I know that doesn't make sense. But the Bible teaches us in 1 John chapter 3, verse 16, that this is how we know what love is. See, it's as simple as that. It's in black and white. This is how we know what love is. When we're struggling to figure it out, when the world is telling us whatever they want us to believe it is, we can always go back to black and white. The is's and the ain'ts, the whole nine, and we can look at it and he says, Jesus Christ laid his life down for us. If that is our example, our ultimate example of love, then this is how we know what love is. It's simple. It's so simple. It's an ABC argument. And we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters, so it's reciprocal. If it has been done for us, then we do it continually for the next person. But even if it's utterly undeserved, even if it's absolutely undeserved. I think some of us have been walking around in grace. Oh, no, I'm going to hold back on that. I'm going to go easy on you guys this morning. Think about it. No. Even when it is utterly undeserved. I don't know about you, but like I really struggle. There's a few instances of my life that I think about and it really bothers me because I had an opportunity to be something greater for somebody. And I failed them because I failed in my own heart. Does that make sense? I had a chance to be something great for somebody. I shared my story up here and I bared my bones in front of you guys and I shared where I failed. And I still hold on to that moment that if I just thought a little bit better of myself, if I was on mission, if I was on point and I was doing what God had called and created me to do, I wouldn't have missed the opportunity to love on that person instead of failing beside him. A chance to lay down my life. It made me think of how sacrificial true love is. Let me switch over to a lighter side because I don't want you guys all to turn off. I want to show you this first picture. And when I found it, I was dying laughing. So this is a pretty popular picture of God, a pretty popular painting of God, sorry. And he's got a Gucci hat on backwards. And I love these memes because they're super funny to me. But it's those of you that have seen the commercials of the Dos Equis guy, the most interesting man in the world. Some of you are like, I know Dos Equis. All right, I see you out there. Shame on you. No, I'm kidding. But I don't always hold a grudge but when someone disobeys me. But when I do, it's forever. You see, when I get in conversation with these people about God's love, and I find out that they have this very unbiblical view of God. This is an absolutely unbiblical view of God. I started looking at this and I was like, This is totally unbiblical. This is a fictional depiction of God, that God is vindictive, that God is grudge holding, that he's a punishing God only interested in our failures. Only interested in our failures and stopping us from having any fun. This is what I run into. This is their overall view of who God is, and it just links up perfectly with their misunderstanding of what love is. I've spoken with many people on the subject of when I'll fail. Every single time love comes up, they adamantly disagree that God is love. Well, if God is love, then why does he allow for death? And why does he allow for murder? And why does he allow for abuse? And why is there violence in the world? And I'm being mocking right now. I'm being condescending, but I'll get to the point. Why is there violence in the world? Why is there poverty? Why is there suffering? And it's funny because most of the people that I sit down and have this conversation with are not looking for a God that would eradicate that, or they're not looking for a God that will come and bring healing in that. Because many of these people, it blows me away. They attribute everything bad, everything horrible in this world to God's inability or God's lack of involvement. But they sit back and enjoy everything beautiful as if it was created with a bang. They want to sit back and believe that everything beautiful that we have from creation to, they want to sit back and believe that Big Bang created that, but then they want to blame God for all the bad stuff. And that's usually how we shut them down. It's like, okay, you want to tell me that this magical thing happened and then all of a sudden everything was beautiful, and then the bad things come when we brought religion into perspective. I started thinking about, again, to lighten it up a little bit, if you can see the next slide. Again, I love these memes. Chuck Norris. What's your favorite Chuck Norris joke? Mine is Chuck Norris doesn't do push-ups, the world pushes away from him. Like, Chuck Norris is such a bad guy, right? I don't know, some of you guys are like, I don't remember this dude. I wasn't allowed to watch him as a kid. Chuck Norris is bad. And he has a black belt in grudge holding. I started thinking about it. I was like, man, I'm going to put my family on blast. Like, my mom will still say to this day that I'm stubborn and I know it. What do you expect? I'm German Irish. And I was like, don't use your ethnicity as an excuse to continue to be stubborn, Mom. Like, I love you, but we got to start moving past some of this stuff. And I was looking, it was like, why would you ever be proud? This is your superpower. Why would you be proud of it? I just like, gosh, man, what's going on? But then I remember I was hanging out I think we were hanging out at staff meeting, and it was probably you that mentioned the lady with Alzheimer's, right? And I'm going to probably mess it up, but I'm going to do the best I can to remember it because I looked online and couldn't find it. But Lee was basically talking about there was this woman that was getting up in her years and was hit with Alzheimer's, that horrible disease. And her memory was fading fast, and so she sits down with her kids and does almost like this last request, not before she dies, but before she loses her memory. And she says something to the effect, can you write down a list of every person that I hate? Every person that's wronged me. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. Every person that did me dirty, did me foul, anybody that I don't ever want to forgive, can you write it down? And I'm sure the kids were looking at him and all like, why would I do that? So that when I forget, I won't forget. I'll always have a list because I don't want that person to walk in and be like, me to not remember them and be loving on them, right? Like, now that's a black belt. That's a 3rd degree black belt in holding a grudge, right? But seriously, how many of us have grown up with that saying, that backward saying that I'll forgive, but I won't forget? That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not remembering the hurt. Forgiveness is not remembering the hurt for future reference. Forgiveness has no memory so that you can truly love in spite of the offense. Think of that for a minute, man. Like, I'm not talking about somebody getting beaten over and over and over again. Use wisdom in that. This is what I've ran into when we talk about this. Well, if I'm not supposed to hold a record of wrongs and I'm supposed to forgive everything and I'm supposed to forget, I'm supposed to do this, well, then I'm supposed to continually go back and be abused. I'm supposed to continually go back and be cheated. No. Use wisdom in that. But it's talking about moving your heart and your mind together past living in the moment where somebody wronged you and living in the existence that God created you for. You know what I mean? Forgiveness has no memory. I want to say that again, so that you can truly love in spite of the offense. Isn't that exactly what God has done for us? Let me show you the next slide. How many of you remember these? Tally marks. I was sitting here last week in church, and I was remembering a moment where I looked at somebody who hadn't personally wronged me. I wouldn't say that they personally wronged me. I just think the offenses, by this person are just out of this world. And it honestly crossed my mind because of the sweatshirt that I found inside of our closet, that I can't look at this guy without these scratches on him. And he's literally one scratch of being just eradicated from my memory, because that's how bad I dislike this person for what they've done. And I was sitting here and I was listening to what Lee was saying, and I thought about it, and I was like, how many of us that is our lens, that's our filter when we look at people, that we can't even see that person anymore because they're so scratched up with what we're holding against them that they're blurred. They're hard to recognize. It's hard to make out a reason of why I would even look past all that ugliness to love them. And it hit me and said, you know what? I wish it was as easy as taking the dry eraser and just getting rid of all that stuff, but I've etched that pain in that individual. You see, because when we don't forgive and we don't move past into healing, we're destroying relationship. We're destroying opportunity to connect with people. I put it like this. We have people in our lives that are nothing more than scratch marks. We have so many tallies against them, we are almost incapable of seeing them as a person anymore. Think about that, scratch marks, just a few more slices and they would be eradicated from existence, at least in our eyes. We tend to reserve the right to refuse service. Let me say that again. We tend to reserve the right to refuse service. And whose service are we refusing? We're refusing God. We're refusing God's service. We're refusing service to Him, of Him, when we reject other people. I'm glad that God, the only one that has the right to hold everything against me, against us, has created a way of unfailing love, a love that never separates us and doesn't refuse me. I'm glad that when God took a look upon me and the world had scratched me up so bad I was unrecognizable, that God was able to move past that and see something worth loving. And He's calling us to do the same thing. I'm glad that I'm not this sin-sick checklist, scratched beyond recognition, that I'm nothing more than a piece of paper that is so marked up that you can't even see the white behind it because all the black marks have covered it. I started thinking about what Paul was doing when he wrote this love chapter and how hard it is to walk through it. I mean, we're taking weeks to walk through this. We're taking a long time to really walk through this and really hit what he was saying and who he was saying it to. He wasn't saying it to a bunch of people that hadn't been influenced by the love of Jesus Christ. He was speaking to the church. He is speaking to you right now, as he was back then. The scripture, let's look at it for a little bit. I pulled up a few different versions. I'm going to keep the standard one, the Christian Standard, up on the board. So love does not keep a record of wrongs. Let's say it another way. Love does not rejoice at wrongdoing. I look at this, and these are translations 10 to 15 years apart, and it made me think of like what was going on in the life of that person that translated. What was going on? And I mean, I understand that when they're exegeting and they're breaking down the word and they're taking a look at it and they're trying to keep it in structure with the way Scripture is, but this sounds totally different to me. To not keep a record of wrongs, but also to not be happy about keeping it, to not hold on to that black belt like it's something to be proud of. Do you know what I mean? And some of us do. It's like, man, I'm never going to forgive that person. How about this? There's another version. Love does not take into account wrong suffered. A lot of the wrongs that we're holding against people, we've taken into account the wrong that has been done to us. And if we don't feel that sorry, that apology, that effort to move past it, if we don't feel that it meets the measure of the account that we're holding against them, then we don't move on. It's almost as bad as like when somebody asks like, how you doing? I'm good. It's that immediate response, right? Are you going to apologize? Yeah, I'm sorry. But if it doesn't match the level of the account that we're holding, then we're never truly going to let go of it. I love looking up different versions because if we don't do the research, like I said, again, we might get stuck in the context. We might get stuck in the context of the immediate circumstance. I went all the way back to the King James Version. Don't throw anything at me. I went all the way back to the KJV, right? And it said this, it said that love, and I'm going to translate it, love thinks no evil. From love not keeping a record of wrong all the way to love not thinking any evil. Gave me a full understanding of how bad it is for me to be holding in reserve all the things that I have holding in my heart. It's almost like trying to pack too much stuff in a storage unit. And we did that before when Kim went out to California for us to get married. We got what we can afford, and we shoved everything we could in there, and we took everything else in the car. We moved to California, we got married, and then God called us back here, and we came back with a U-Haul, and it was like, where are we going to put all this stuff? To the storage unit. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, but we folded up the futon cushion and we're shoving it 8 feet above our head, just trying to cram that thing in the top and really deciding what we were going to take down in the basement of Kim's family. And I was thinking like, man, there was no room for anything else in there. Think about your heart for a minute. Think about as you're walking around and you're struggling to have any joy. You're questioning God and all these things. Maybe it's time to just go inside of your heart and clean out some of those stones. Maybe it's time to dig inside all the wrongs that you have and set them out and really, really deal with them. Not just throw them by the wayside, but take a look. Why am I holding an account against this person that probably has no idea that they've even wronged me to this measure? To work on better communication than just being silent for 3 days before somebody finally blows up and said, hey, I exist. I'm here. I get it that you're holding something against me, but I would rather you yell at me than pretend like I don't exist. Oh, we're not that kind of people though, right? I'm glad Lee laughed. You know, I want to pause for a second. As I was prepping for this, there's one specific time that came really to my heart. I had a longtime friend and mentor in the Church of God from Fresno pass away recently in December. And I remember I was back home and the family had reached out to me and they were like, hey man, I wish, we really want you to come see Wes, Mr. Kerner. And I dealt hard with it because I'd seen this man in his prime, and I remember every time I got up to preach, he sat in the same spot and he would always look up at me and he'd always be weeping. And I'd walk out to greet people as they took off, and he'd grab a hold of me and he would tell me that the gospel was preached and God was honored today. That's all he told me every single time he walked out. And I loved this man still. And so I was asked to go to a care facility and found out that he was struggling with dementia and pre-Alzheimer's. And I knew that when I walked in, my family had told me that my grandmother was there as well. So I'll get to that in a minute. But I remember walking in and just feeling sick to my stomach that I was going to look into the eyes of a man that I loved, and he wasn't going to remember me. And I was going to be crying because it hurt so bad to not be remembered by him and not be able to share one last time, man, that I loved him, and for him to understand why I was saying that. And I sat there for as long as I could, and it was probably one of the most, I can't imagine what he was going through, but it was one of those painful things that I had to see when he was like, I just don't understand why I'm here, and I don't know who you are. And I got up and just, I told him I love you, and I hope to see you again, and I walked out of the room, and I gathered myself together to do it again with my grandmother. I walked over and said, hey, I need to go to my grandmother's room, but I'm going to need someone to come with me and translate because my grandmother doesn't speak English very well, and I don't speak Spanish very well. And I remember walking in and seeing my grandmother who, gosh, man, she's always been small, but she's probably like 4 foot nothing, 90 pounds. I mean, bless her heart, man. And I walked in And the lady said, Senora Cruz, Miss Cruz, and in Spanish said, this is, somebody's here to see you. And my grandmother said, ¿Quién es este gordo? Who is this fat guy? Okay. Thank you for laughing at me right now, okay? I'm broken, man. I just said goodbye to my mentor and he doesn't know who I am. You guys are awesome people. Thank you. Wow, man. So yeah, who's this fat guy? And I knew what she was saying. I go, Grandma, I'm your son's son. I'm your son's son. No sé, I don't know. And so I sat there and she would talk to the lady. She wouldn't even look at me, and the lady would tell me, so why are you here? And and I would say something back, and it was this conversation to where it broke me. It broke me because of the guilt that I have of not reaching out. See, I told you guys my dad left when I was young, and we were just told the family wanted nothing to do with us, and I never reached out to my grandmother. And then when I did, I remember that all I did was do drugs in her house, and all I did was steal from her, and all I did was do these things to hurt her. And I'm standing in the room with her, and I'm wanting one more chance to say, not only I love you, but that I need you to forgive me for the way that I disrespect you. I need you to forgive me for the way that I treated you when I had the opportunity to have conversations with you. And it hit me was that, you know what? I was never going to get that chance, selfishly. I was never going to get that chance to tell her I was sorry because she had no idea who I was. And that's not forgiveness. That's the point I'm trying to get across. Forgetting is not forgiveness. Because if that was the truth, then the way that I let down Wes and the way that I disrespected my grandmother, the second that their mind was unable to process that memory, then I would have been free, right? But I'm not free. I still hold on to that. I feel like this is the way that many one-sided forgivenesses are lived out, is that they ask for forgiveness and they expect the person to forget and they want to move forward after that, and it's really hard unless there's that true community and that true connection. Will you put up the next slide? I started thinking about this, remembering forgiveness, that when someone does something wrong, don't forget all the things they did right. I know it's really hard to do because in that instance, again, I'm going to use my family as an illustration. But I remember one time I was on a date with Kim, and I'm not going to go into details about everything, and she's smiling right now. We're on a date, and we're hanging out, and it was, we're kind of joking and talking back and forth, and it's a typical kind of couple banter back and forth, and I'm like, I said something, and before you know it, she said something, and it hurt my feelings so bad. And I'll maybe I'll get with one of you guys later and I'll tell you, but it was like, she's quick, man. Oh, she's getting quick. I'm training her well. And she just said something, and I don't think she realized how bad it hurt. And I was like, check. I want to get out of here. I want to get out of here, man. I don't want to deal with this right now. I can't believe you said that. We get in the car, we're driving. It's like, well, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it. I said, I don't want to talk about it. And I ended up screaming. Something wasn't very nice. I ended up screaming, and it's sad is that immediately after that, I had forgiven her. Right after I let that scream out, we were driving home, but because I didn't know how to further the conversation in a healthy way, I just stayed quiet. And we drove home, and she went in the house and went to the room, and I went downstairs hanging out, and I texted her from downstairs because I'm lazy. Hey, babe, come and lay with me. Nope, I'm laying in bed already. Oh, man. So now I'm the one who, I really got a lot of wrongs to make up for, right? So I go upstairs, I jump in bed, I'm trying to cuddle, hey, babe, I'm sorry, blah, 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 but I don't believe what she did was intentional, but the situation and the circumstances that I'm in my life right now just hit me, and I was like, oh, my God, man. So anyways, that's a little bit more of my story, but in that moment, I forgot everything that was great about her. I forgot the reason why I married her, because it was that quick, and I was willing to hold on to it that fast and let go of everything else that we had. And I forgot of all the things that were right. I struggle a lot in my relationships. I've talked a little bit about my stepdad up here, and I've talked a little bit about my brother. And I think about it, man, you know what, man, I hold all these things against these people because they have no idea how bad they hurt me. And I have a huge inability to be able to communicate that in a healthy way. I need to be praying for God to really fix that in my heart. It's so easy to dwell on what they all did wrong and forget what made me love them to begin with. I think my self-sided, self-guided view of life and love aids in this destruction and this inability to remember the wrong, inability to remember the right and hold on to the wrong. Will you put up the next slide? Some people are holding grudges against you for things they did to you. Oh, we missed one. That's the last one? Okay, I'll go into that. Go ahead and put that picture back up. It's okay. I've always struggled with that saying, and it goes hand in hand with this picture. This is still hard for me to look at. This is about 13, 14 years ago. It was one of the last times that I was incarcerated, and I weighed about 180 pounds. I was smoked out on meth. I had quit my gang, and so that was like the one good thing that I did. I spoke to God, and he did a miracle in my life, and I still had to go to prison. I received a life verse that has carried me for the last 13 years, but I had to deal with, the truth of it is that I'd abused, mistreated, lied to, stolen from, and disrespected my entire family and most of society that I came in contact with, and that I was scratched up. Was very, very scratched up. I live every day with a reminder that I'm forgiven, but it's not forgotten. As an ex-con, I step into certain scenarios and certain circumstances where I'm just constantly reminded that because I've made this mistake, that for the rest of my life, it's always going to be held against me. And it's something that builds some resentment in my heart, and I'm really working through it. But it's also a reminder that the world does not set up the way that God is. That the world is not love, that God is love. And it's a constant reminder that I need to stop seeking comfort in the things of the world and continue to seek comfort in the things of God. Forgiven by God, but not forgotten by government is a slang that I've adopted. And it's hard. Thanks for laughing at me again. I appreciate that. This verse is a great reminder that this world does not operate or function under the directive of love, but there's a kingdom. There's a kingdom that we can usher in through our every experience, our every encounter, and our every exchange. And that's God's kingdom. I don't have a way to fix the wrongs in your heart. I can show you the Bible verse. I can go through illustrations. I can talk until I'm blue in the face, but nothing's going to move you past what's been done to you other than allowing God to just infiltrate your heart and see some of those things and really start to deal with, why do I respond? Why do I hold an account to this level? I think one of the things that we can do this morning as we start to wrap this up is that this is our response time. This is a time where we do our giving. This is a time where we have an opportunity for communion. This is a time where we have an opportunity for prayer. And luckily enough, because I've been in services where we don't have the altars, there's a place to come and kneel. I just want to pray with you as the team comes up, and I just want to ask God to infiltrate our hearts. God, just come and be who and what we need in our hearts, God. Come and sit next to those struggles. Help us to see the person who's behind the hurt. Help us to try to understand. And God, where we can't understand, help us to step into true forgiveness, where we're able to look past that at that person, God. We're able to look past it at that person and see somebody that you love without words, God, that you love so intensely, so directly. God, I bet right now, if we sat and thought about a trauma that's been done to us, boom, it's going to come right to our mind. That 5, 10, 15 seconds of something that's been done to us, and we're holding it on one side of our heart, and it brings back almost that fear, that humiliation, God, that brokenness, that vulnerability. God, I would ask that you would stretch the whole story around that moment and stop having us live in that trauma. God, that you would bring that whole story around and see where we're responsible, where someone else is responsible, where we can own up, where they can own up. And if we have to, if we're called to give exactly, absolutely what is needed, even if it's deserved the least. Father, thank you that as we can bring our gifts before you, you ask us to have a correct heart. God, as we take communion, you ask us to search ourselves. God, as we offer up prayer, you tell us that we are to forgive as we've been forgiven. And God, as we kneel before you, it's just a sign of submission that you're the king of our lives. And we're humbly coming before you with everything that we have, God, and we ask you just to take that. We ask you to take it, run with it, God, and let us be free. Father, thank you for the opportunity to worship and to praise you, to fail. But God, most of all, thank you that you don't see us through scratched lenses. In Jesus' name.